Do you want some breakfast, John? John?
Yes, please, yeah.
What do you want, John?
Whatever.
Did you hear what I said before, though?
Tea?
I can do you... No, not the tea. I can do you some... Have you eaten? John?
Sorry.
It's really distracting.
Sorry, okay.
Is there something important on there?
No.
What were you looking at, if you don't mind me asking?
Just stuff. Just stuff. Yeah, what people are up to.
Okay. That's interesting.
I'll have a cup of tea.
I made you one, didn't I?
Yeah,
sorry, I was just distracted because I was on...
Yeah.
I was just looking at the...
Okay, I'll have...
Well, I was doing some filming.
Toast,
actually.
please.
Okay. John? Sorry? Do you want a cup of tea?
Miles away then, yes, please.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. On this Friday. Another beautiful, slight sarcasm there in terms of the weather.
Yeah.
Friday afternoon, but it is Friday afternoon.
It
so
is.
It's the end of the weekend.
It is at Rowty Club HQ. Yeah. What we're talking about this week?
Well, the Reality Club juggernaut continues, and I think this week is probably the first, I would say, slightly controversial podcast that we've done so far. You could say the last one was slightly controversial in Lanzarote.
That's one word for it. Let you judge.
You can have a look at that one and see what you think. But this is controversial because we are, for the first time, from my perspective anyway, going to be tying something in that's quite close to a lot of people's hearts with how to bring it into a coaching style help.
Absolutely.
Format.
So the Great Retrieval, getting our kids back from the screen, sounds a bit dramatic. Sounds a bit clickbaity for those in the industry, but forgive us for that. But now we've got your attention. John, perhaps we can talk a little bit about the term I've pinched from somewhere else shamelessly, is junk food for the brain.
Well, what we're trying, basically the whole point of today's discussion is we are trying to have a look at the effects of phones. Not necessarily just social media, but phones in general, tablets, technology, in terms of ourselves, our relationships with our children, our relationships with other people. Because obviously one of the main things that we are focusing on, or the main thing we are focusing on in this company of Reality Club, is mental health. And we are starting to see cracks appearing in terms of people's mental health linked to screen time.
Absolutely. So really, as the title suggests, what are these things doing to us? What are they doing to our kids' brains? I mean, there's lots of, we're not scientists, we're not clinicians, and we don't claim to be clear, but a lot of us will be familiar with the 2-hour guidelines and the 2-hour findings and what long-term use can do to all of our brains, and also this idea that we know a lot of these platforms are designed and the portal to them is our lovely little devices to get that dopamine loop. And what's that doing to our kids? Basically, we've got really quite hooked on these things. They can have advantages, but is it not just robbing our time?
Well, I've got a couple of things that firstly are close to me in terms of my own personal opinions. Some may say, well, it is what it is. But I just remember when my two were very young, going to various places, hotels, and seeing 1-year-olds sat at a breakfast table with a tablet in front of them. I know, it's, for me, what that's creating is a situation which is happening now, where families are not talking. They're not sat around the table having discussions. I'm not saying it's directly linked to that, but we're all guilty from time to time of being on our phone too much. And unfortunately, and I spoke to you earlier about this, a lot of these magazines you can see, it'll show a picture of 1985, look at us all talking, and then a picture of 2005. Mm-hmm. Nobody's talking, everybody's on their screens. And what we speak about in mental health a lot, you see it on the adverts on TV, I as a coach understand this principle as well. We do a lot of this, is that we talk. Communication is helpful for your mental health.
Absolutely. And there's so many different themes that we'll explore over the coming weeks as well around how that's affected community. I was watching a fellow YouTuber talk about his experiences of the Spanish culture versus here, and you can't completely blame technology. And listen, we're not saying that technology is bad. This isn't about getting rid of technology. This is about actually embracing the other stuff, which is what we call the circle of reality and the circle of distraction. And for those of you who will see the book when it comes out, got to plug that, of course, as we always do, the sort of the scales, as we put it, in between. To John's point there, conversation is nourishing. It's important, good for our brains as adults and children, good for our mental health, etc. So many different benefits. So bringing that back to the screens, the circle of distraction, our little hamster wheel with all of those vices that we have, the eating, the drinking, the going on our phones. Let's just bring that back to say that we're not perfect. We're not looking for perfection here, and we're not talking about that with you all today. But what we are looking for is maybe a bit of reflection, to John's point again, on what are we using our phones for? Because if I say, and John says, we use our phones for really important things, I'm helping my phone to write a book first thing in the morning. I find that really calming. I have my morning coffee and that's fine and there's no one around. But actually, are we really using our phones to phone our distant relatives in Australia, to write something stimulating, to keep up with friends? Or actually, are we just scroll? We check our phones 80 times a day on average.
Well, we use the phrase doom scrolling, don't we? It's one of the things that I hear quite a lot of people, and obviously being a coach myself, it is a little bit of a situation that I'm finding at the moment that a few of my clients are being brought up there at an age where they've been brought up from a very early age with screens in front of them, and we're starting to become a lot less isolated society where I was reading something about the film 1984, George Orwell, yeah. Where everybody just becomes isolated and just, do you think that the metaverse coming out where, and I think we speak about this in the book, that if when the Ukraine war was going on, you could actually be speaking to somebody who's right in the middle of that, and it distracts you from real life, from things that are happening around you. Are you going to spend your day just being inside? Because you can if you wanted to feel like you're associated with the outside world, but not even go out, you can do it via your screen.
Exactly.
And so this is where I find that, there has to be some kind of balance between the two, which we spoke about. I don't want us to sit here giving us all our opinions. It'd be great to hear your opinions on this as well through the Reality Club community.
Absolutely.
But what we want to talk about in here is how can we try to change or make it more effective in terms of, yes, we all have to accept that we've got screens. They're going to be around, that's life. But it's trying to balance it so that we still have the social side of things where we do go out and do things with our friends and we talk.
So just moving on to looking at particularly kids, it strikes me that the obvious with myself and with others isn't always obvious. And the obvious is probably the kids will follow your lead. So the more distracted we are, the more we're checking our phones, as we all do. Really, the kids are by high school age itching to get phones, and can we really, I wouldn't use the word blame, but can we really expect them to be any different when they see lots of adults doing that? So how can we move to a position where we get some more balance, not eliminate? That's not what we're talking about. How can we get some more balance, do you think, John?
Because like you said, it's easy for your children to mirror things. They look up to you, and I know children are our future. So, and some of you I know don't have children, it's fine, but you can also, you can influence maybe your nieces and nephews, if you don't have, because these are the ones that are going to be living. We're still living in an era, or I certainly am, where I remember the days without having phones and screens, but I also appreciate that we have them now. So I can sit on the fence and say, well, actually, I can put my phone away because I remember what it's like not to have it. But we're going to have a generation of people that are coming through the ranks very soon who won't know any different, and they need to have that balance. One of the things that they're doing in the UK is they're going to start looking at schools out there. They're going to start looking at not allowing children to have phones. They're getting handed them in.
They are indeed, and we've seen social media bans come in as well. Obviously, this is about phones, but what do we do on our phones? What is causing us to be distracted? I come from working in an industry where I know all too well the effect of the design of platforms. That is just about...
Well, we wouldn't be here talking to you if there wasn't social media.
And that's a good thing, because we're doing this primarily to help people. But where we have instances of people feeling, and I think this is the difference with generations as well, as you've said, John, there's a difference between needing to go and scroll on social media and wanting to. And perhaps our generation, at our age, was more about wanting to. So if we're feeling need, if we're feeling compelled, how do we decouple that in our mind from the rational, I'm going to use this to have a video call with my mum or dad, sake of argument, who live in the south, we're in the north. The good stuff, the thing that enhances, it doesn't undermine.
I mean, listen, when it comes to coaching, it's about mindset. And what we would say when it comes to mindset is we don't want to think that you can change your mindset overnight. It's not going to be cold turkey. It's not going to be all of a sudden, right, I'm going to put my phone away and I know that I will never need to pick it up until I need it. Because we start to get automatically, we pick it up. And one of the biggest problems, or a bigger problem that I see, is catastrophizing. You know, we are now built into a society where, and it's been proven, that we want to see bad things on the screen.
Yeah.
You know, and the news is 99% bad things. So we pick up and go, guess what's happened today?
Yeah.
You know, and it sort of scares us, but at the same time, for a lot of people, it gives them that hit of... But unfortunately, then we start to catastrophize over more than just the news. It starts to become integral into ourselves about catastrophizing over everyday events that happen. So what we really are saying is we need to step back and try to find a different way of finding that dopamine hit.
Yeah, yeah.
And not having your phone and conversing and going to meet your friends is a dopamine hit.
So we talk about reframing, because this isn't catastrophizing, because one could say, well, hang on a minute, guys, you know, you're saying, oh, actually this is a bad thing and, you know, there are some harmful effects. Let's talk about flipping that to the positive things in the circle of reality. So do our viewers, again, as John said, we're really interested to hear from you in the comments or through all the comms channels that our friends and followers know are available, on how do you actually achieve that practically? Because people might say, this is all very well, but when you've got 2 kids, it's the school holidays, it's really hard. How do you do that? And I think maybe some of the ways I've found successful, this is just anecdotal evidence, is actually maybe having a place or a day, a time, specific settings where as a family, we have our sort of house rules, the breakfast table, the meal table. I'm quite traditional and it's not always possible and the kids don't always eat with us, but when they do, we try to protect that space and not have mobile devices. Sometimes I'm that distracted by my phone, I put it in the drawer, but I don't always do that. This isn't perfection. No. I'm not perfect, certainly, and it's not a realistic aim, but it seems like there are some practical tips I've found, don't know about you, John, that do help, that are realistic.
When it comes to tips, I think the main thing that we need to get across here is look, this is real. This is reality. We're talking about the reality club. The reality is that as our lives continue and as another 10 years goes by with AI, with screens, with technology, it's going to get more and more and more. It's going to be so intertwined in our lives, which it already is, that we're not saying. We'll never be able to say, I am taking technology away from my life. I am taking the screens away from my children until they're 16, etc., etc. What we're trying to work out here is because it's affecting mental health and people's mental health and children's mental health, we're getting more and more cases of ADHD, ADD, all these things that are starting to become linked to screen time and not enough social interaction time with others, that we need to manage mentally, a better mindset to manage the whole process of having screens in our lives. And like you said, we look at the circle of distraction, and social media and screen time is a huge distraction. And it's too big a distraction. It's tipping the scales way too much, and to the point where people are like starting to become like zombies. You know, they're just like walking around. Like, you know, the snippet we showed earlier of me sat at the breakfast table, not listening, not engaging. You know, it's the engagement. And if you can't engage as children, then that engagement will then lead to how are you going to engage in a workplace when you're older? Maybe you won't have to engage in a workplace. Maybe we won't have workplaces in 40 years.
Well, this is true, and technology will probably become ubiquitous and pervasive. So if you actually, and this is a whole separate edition in itself, if you look at where technology could go, you might not have screens. You probably won't have screens. It will just be in the background, ubiquitous computing. But we're still, it's the way the brain's going is we're looking for something else.
We're still human.
What are we looking for out there? Can we be content, being a bit bored, doing nothing, as you said, I think it was at last edition, looking out the window. You know, we did some work together. It's just stare out the window. Stare out the window for a minute, 2 minutes tomorrow, 3 minutes the day afterwards, and just be, you know, as I say to my kids, there's nothing wrong with being a little bit bored. A feeling of boredom is good, and a feeling that everything isn't just presented means that, you know, the stuff that's going on in your head, you're having to work through, you're having to work problems out. Listen, we're not specialists in that field, like I said.
Well, we're not specialists. We're coming from an angle where we're trying to. All the whole point of these reality club podcasts is we're coming to you from a point of view of our experiences.
Yes, exactly.
You know, and with my children, they are starting to get to a point where they've got screens, but it's important that as adults, you are very, very consciously aware. So you have to live in the now consciously to be able to think, how is this? And again, we talk about the bigger screen in the book and the bigger picture. How is this? What am I doing with my children now going to impact them as they get older? And it's looking at the bigger screen. It's looking at where we are now. If you're allowing them, here's your phone. I've got loads to do. I haven't got time to play. We haven't got time to do this with you. What could that do? I'm not saying it is going to do. What could that do into the future for your children?
But we are believers, and you know, I'm sure John would say the same. The power of mindset and the power of the family unit will always and should always transcend technology. And you know, I've worked in technology for decades. You know, that we do not let the technology cart lead the horse. It needs to be the right perspective on that. I think that's
so we look at the circle of distraction. But then we said about, well, let's tip the scales back. You know, let's tip the scales back. Let's have the circular reality scaling with that distraction. Yes, there will be times when the phones will be needed. There'll be times when you'll want to go on your phone. But what about doing other things from the circular reality? What about trying to tip the balance and scale and say, right, for the next hour, we're not going to do Switch, Nintendo, or this. We're going to do this as a family. I'm not saying you're not doing that now, and we're not having to go at anybody. We're just trying to see whether you can think for yourself and reflect for yourself whether you have that balance, and that's what it's all about.
And people might grumble a bit. Adults, children, in my experience, grumble a bit. But I bet you enjoy it afterwards. I bet you might grumble before, but you might not grumble at sort of transitioning afterwards. And I think you mentioned neurodivergent versus neurotypical. I think there are some common themes we've talked about. There are probably some other things that are relevant in terms of transitioning for certain children. The not pulling the plug, I think, and not just, you know, we
not
talk about
turkey.
Not cold turkey, and as an adult as well, get some balance. 5-minute warnings can be really useful. We've talked about some of the other practical measures, but mainly help us write that chapter. Get in touch. Help us talk about some of this, because this is why we do what we do, isn't it? As John said,
we're reflecting on our experiences, but it doesn't necessarily mean that our experiences are true to everybody. So it's always interesting to hear. You know, and we do get feedback from this from others when we spoke about stuff to say, well, I sat out the window, looked out the window the other 15 minutes, but I know that my son can't, and I'm going to try to get him to do it. Or, you know, we like to hear how other people view this. We're not here to condone anything. We're here to speak about experiences and try to work out a better way, if need be, because some families might not have screens at all. They might be like, we're already out there. We don't need to worry about this podcast. But there will be quite a few thinking, actually, yes, I agree with this, but what can I do about it?
Yeah, and on that note, and just to cap off, help us write some of this material and we can write it together. And that's what we've done with other people, isn't it? Who are parents and non-parents as well, because that's about us all supporting each other, self-coaching. Just like you coached me, we coach each other, and we're hopeful that we could all.
And also, if one of the biggest areas of being able to coach each other when we speak about coaching is when you are sat together talking. Because without realising, if you're sat in a group, you are coaching each other without even realising. Now, if you're all sat on your phones, there's no coaching going on there. So even if one of that group of 4, maybe you're at the pub, maybe you're having a meal, has a few problems they want to address with the group, and they don't feel they can because the other 3 on their phone, then you're not getting much out of that sort of evening.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Great Retrieval, I think some of the things we've talked about practically and tying it back to coaching are really important. If you do want some, we'll call them scripts, tips, and some of the things that we've pulled together with other parents over the last so many months, which are really valuable, and thank you for your contributions to those. You can get in touch via our new email address, realityclubhq@google.com, or via other channels. Also like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching or listening this latest edition, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you very much.